Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise and thanks belong to God, the Lord of the worlds. May peace and blessings be upon all of God's prophets and messengers, including the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're doing well and staying safe. Inshallah, we have two topics we're going to discuss today. One domestic, one international, but all of it relevant to us right here at home, no matter where we are in the United States. First, we're going to talk about a string of hate crimes that have occurred in the state of New York and what the local community is doing about that issue. And then secondly, we're going to discuss what's going on in Tunisia. As you may have heard, there is, to put it mildly, political unrest there. It's of great concern to those of us who support freedom and justice in the Muslim and Arab and broader world. And so we're going to talk about that with a member of Democracy for the Arab World now. But we're going to start, inshallah, here domestically in New York. Let's bring on the litigation director of CAIR New York, Ahmed Mohammed. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ahmed. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me.
Yes, as always. Good to see you. Good to see you. So, Brother Ahmed, let's dive into it. First, tell us what has been happening in New York. There have been, I think, 3 recent incidents that are, really of concern to the community. What's going on?
Yeah. So, thank you for highlighting that really important issue. There have been a string of incidents throughout the city, but in particular here in Queens, we've seen 3 incidents perpetrated by the same individual. 2 happened on the same day about 3 weeks ago. Involving 2 couples, one middle-aged couple who were approached from behind, assaulted verbally, and then the sister had her hijab pulled. And the individual ran away, a middle-aged African-American man. And then later on that evening, an elderly couple was approached in similar fashion, and that elderly woman was struck in the face and had to receive medical attention for either a fractured or a broken nose. And then just a couple of days ago, the same individual approached a Muslim sister in Queens. Again, this time he had a knife with him, and he approached her unprovoked, very violent situation, yelling anti-Muslim slurs, showed a knife to her. Obviously, we can all imagine she was extremely terrified of the situation. And now what we're doing is we're raising public awareness to make sure that our community knows about what's going on, and that if they have information that can lead to this individual being, held accountable for his, shameful and bigoted actions, we want that individual to be held accountable. And so if you have information, please contact your local law enforcement precinct, the NYPD, Crime Stoppers, and give them the tips that will lead to justice in the situation.
Now, Ahmed, the second couple, was this also the second group that was attacked? Was this also Muslim individuals?
Yeah, all 3 incidents involved Muslims.
Wow.
Just to be clear, no one was stabbed.
Thank God.
The second incident did not involve a knife that we're aware of, but did involve a physical strike to the face by the assailant. He's been at large for several weeks now. There are photographs of him. There are videos of him engaging in this conduct. And so we need the public's help, right? So if you know this individual, if you think you know this individual, reach out, do your civic duty to make sure that, this individual is held accountable. Who knows, what his motivations are for engaging in these actions. What we do know, though, is that they're anti-Muslim, that he's targeting his victims based on either them looking Muslim or he thinks they're Muslim.
This is very, it's disturbing. The fact that he's still at large after all this time is very concerning. The fact that he, on 3 separate incidents, targeted Muslims. The first time you could say, all right, one-off thing, maybe he's crazy. That happens. But to do it 3 times over an extended period of time, and not to target other people, but to single out people who appear to be Muslim and are Muslim in this case, that's incredibly disturbing. It would indicate a level of focus and determination and a continuing threat. And so there are pictures of him. I think we can put that on screen potentially while we're here today.
It's an escalating threat too, Edward. So if you notice from each incident, it seems this individual has gotten more confident and more violent. It started with, assaulting a young woman and her partner and pulling the hijab, to striking, a physical strike up to the face to an elderly woman. And now it's escalated to using a weapon, a knife, to threaten and to harm someone of the Muslim faith. And so it seems like there's been a drastic escalation in the violence that this individual is perpetrating. And it, of course, has a visceral and real impact on the entire community. There's obviously a lot of fear associated with it. And so we need law enforcement, we need the district attorney, to really step up here and make sure that the Muslim community is going to be safe. And that when an incident like this happens, that it's going to be taken seriously. And so we're going to do everything that we can to just inform the public of what's going on, keep them aware, and then call on the appropriate officials to do the right thing in this situation.
Gotcha. We're just going to put on screen briefly the image of the individual, and also ask our producer to put this in the chat, the link to the articles in the chat, so you can see that's one photo of him. New York is a big place. It's pretty easy to disappear if you want to, but you've got the picture. I assume the NYPD, with all the surveillance and intelligence activity they put into looking after certain communities, I would hope when they've got the picture of the suspect, they'll be able to track this guy down very quickly. I would hope anyway. Ahmed, final words, any thoughts, advice for the community while you're dealing with this?
Yeah, look, CAIR New York is here for you. If you've been a victim either of one of these incidents or others, please let us know. Contact us, 646-665-7599. The other thing is, we need our city, we need public officials to call out this type of hate against the Muslim community. And there needs to be appropriate funding for community-based organizations that are helping hate crime survivors and victims, right? Advocates, because our community needs help. Our community needs organizations that they trust, that are on the front lines with them. And so it's really important that, the right organizations, the right mechanisms are being funded, so that, organizations can respond to this, but they can also help with stemming the tide against these types of incidents, right? We have to get to the root cause. That's education and resources. It's very difficult to stop a wave of hate crimes when all you're focusing on is the reaction to the crime itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Brother Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah protect you and the whole community, and bring this individual to justice quickly, and protect anyone else from suffering harm.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good day, everyone.
You too, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. So that's what's going on in New York. Very disturbing situation. Community is following that, working on it, and obviously, hopefully, law enforcement is putting all of their resources into it. Let's now move internationally. We're going to talk about something else very important that's happening overseas, but impacts so many people around the world. Let's bring on our next guest. And our next guest is Raed Jarrar, who is the Advocacy Director of Democracy for the Arab World Now, DAWN, the organization, human rights organization founded by the late Jamal Khashoggi. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Raed. How are you?
Alaikum salam. Thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Well, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it, especially on short notice. So, Raed, let us start by asking you this. Tell us, not everyone knows what's happening in Tunisia. It hasn't gotten as much attention in the media as, say, what happened in Turkey back in 2016 or what happened in Egypt back in 2013. But just give us a brief rundown. What happened in Tunisia over the past 48 hours?
It's been very dramatic. What happened in Tunisia in the last 48 hours can only be described as a coup, unfortunately. The Tunisian president has announced to consolidate powers overnight, invoking a very controversial article in the constitution that has different interpretations. So he suspended the work of the legislative branch. He suspended the work of the cabinet. He's also trying to suspend the work of the judiciary branch by assigning himself as the head of the judiciary. So it's a soft coup. It's a constitutional coup by the president. It's very, very concerning, very alarming, especially taking into considerations other counter-revolutionary coups that took place in the region in the last decade.
Yeah. So, right. I think the other thing that I think disturbed people is the police raided the office of Al Jazeera, which, seems to be a common thing that happens when there's really going to be a full-blown coup, right? Now, the other thing now, it seems recently things may have calmed down a bit. It seems that none of the political opposition have been arrested or disappeared. The former prime minister is still free. The speaker of parliament, looks like no one's been arrested or anything yet. So are you, looking at where we are right now, where do you, are things better? Are things in a better position? Have your concerns been allayed somewhat? Or do you think still dangerous situation, still a coup? What are your thoughts?
It's extremely concerning. The fact that no one has been killed yet, no one has been arrested and tortured yet. The fact that we're saying these sentences with the word "yet" at them, at the end of them, is concerning enough. This is definitely as concerning as any other coup or coup attempt that happened around the world. Gotcha. I think U.S. Americans, including myself, witnessed this happening in our own country earlier this year. In January 6th, there was a coup attempt by the U.S. president. U.S. Americans historically never thought, or many of us here never thought that we would see these events happen in the United States. We saw it happen in the U.S., and it was like an eye-opening experience to see how many U.S. citizens were rooting for the coup. They were happy and celebrating a potential coup. Same thing happens in other parts of the world. Like we saw it happen in Egypt in 2013. There were literal celebrations in the street supporting a military coup in Egypt. There were celebrations supporting a coup in Libya or similar counter-revolutionary movements. I guess the point that I'm driving here is that we have seen this movie before. Yeah. And we have seen it with the same actors, the same regional powers to be who are supporting these counter-revolutions, the same kind of ideologies rooted in anti-Muslim sentiments and Islamophobia to circumvent democratic process in the region. So, and this is something that we're very, very concerned about. Like, honestly, like, to tell you the truth, I feel like if this coup was led by, a movement that identifies as a religious Muslim movement against, a parliament that is mostly secular, I think Washington, D.C. would have freaked out. I think we'd have heard condemnations from many other countries about the process and about the importance of democracy. But what we have seen over and over again in the region, that when religious Muslim groups are elected by the people, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in Palestine, whether it is in Libya, and whether it's in Tunis, any attempts by hyper-secular anti-Muslim groups to come after them and circumvent the democratic process by staging coups are usually met with either silence or very, very timid condemnations coming from the US and the EU.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question, which is what has been the reaction of our government in the United States, which is obviously, said a lot about support for democracy and human rights and freedom and all that around the world, especially when it comes to American adversaries, Russia and China and Iran. What has been said about what's happened in Tunisia so far?
Very little have been said. I agree with you that our own government in the United States is very fast to condemn violence and condemn anti-democratic measures and call for freedom of speech when it comes to China or Cuba or Iran. But when it comes to some governments or allies that the U.S. identify with. It's very, very rare to hear strong condemnations. So what happened so far is underwhelming. The United States government has expressed its concern, meaningless concern, over what has been going on in Tunisia. They have refused to call what happened a coup. Yesterday, we heard the White House say a coup is a legal determination, and we're waiting for the State Department to do the calculations to and tell us whether this is a coup or not. It's literally a joke, like like imagine like having like this army of people in the State Department, like using calculators to see if this is a coup or not a coup. It's very obvious what happens. It needs 2 minutes of determination, and there is definitely political considerations that is preventing the United States from saying the right thing. And from my perspective, I think we have to pressure the U.S. government to say the right thing at this moment. The U.S. government has failed to take a clear stand when it came to opposing coups in Latin America or in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, or in the Arab world, in the Middle East and North Africa. And the whole world is watching. All of dictators, dictator wannabes, others, they're watching what the Biden administration is doing this week. Are they going to continue the U.S. failed policies of giving a blind eye, a blank check to allies by not centering human rights concerns, by not centering democracy and democratic concerns? Or are they going to switch? Is this going to be a new moment in the US where we will actually have an administration that will say no to a coup? We are going to suspend the US support to Tunis, whether we like the president or not, whether he's a nice guy or not, whether we like his politics or not, whether he's an ally or not. We are going to take a principled stand to say no to coups. The president has to immediately reverse his decisions, reactivate the parliament, and then figure out whatever differences the country is having through the democratic process. This is really an amazing moment for the Biden administration to shine, or to go down history as yet another administration that has failed to transmit the right message to the world.
Yeah. Well, it begs a question at some point, I'm sure for many American policymakers, they prefer to see Arab nations, Arab Muslim nations ruled by dictators who will toe the line, who will not rock the boat, especially when it comes to American foreign policy in the region. There's this pervading fear that if the people of these countries are allowed to freely elect their leaders, they will elect leaders who will, insist on controlling their natural resources and selling them at an appropriate price. They'll insist on solidarity with the Palestinian cause. They may even, I dare say, insist on international solidarity among Muslims against injustice, all of which is, very scary to people who prefer to see the Muslim world divided and weakened and at odds with itself. And so I guess in some sense, right, is it a surprise when European governments, the American government, are quiet about this? I mean, should we expect anything better? I guess we should, because people put their money where their mouth is. If you say you stand for certain values, you should live up to that. But at this point, call me a skeptic or a cynic, but I'm not shocked anymore. It's just almost kind of par for the course. What do you think?
First, I have to say I apologize about this. I have to actually leave the call in the next minute or so because
no
I
problem.
have another call.
We end anyway. So you have the final remarks, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I am not shocked either. I think the United States government has a really shameful history in supporting and funding coups and invoking coups, let alone being quiet about military and constitutional coups around the world. I'm not shocked. But I am as dismayed and as disappointed that this administration is not taking the right steps. I agree with you that the foreign policy is rooted in the same form of anti-Muslim sentiments and Islamophobia as your first speaker was talking about. When someone in New York attacked a Muslim couple for looking Muslim and pulls their hijab or punches them or physically harms them, the same kind of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiments are causing our government to react this way to anti-democratic measures in the Muslim world, including what we saw in Egypt against because it was justified as a this is like a coup against the Muslim Brotherhood. And Muslim Brotherhoods are bad guys because they have the word Muslim in their name. And what happens in Gaza against Hamas, they were bad guys because they're Muslim. And now what's going on against Al-Nahda in Tunis, they're just Muslims. They're bad guys by affiliation, by nature. So I feel like that is the main blocking that is happening in the U.S. foreign policy that is causing the U.S. government not to come out and criticize this coup and call it a coup. It is deeply rooted in Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiments. Deeply rooted. That's where it comes from. So I do think that there is a lot of work to do. A lot of it, some of it has to do with education, reaching out to our public officials to educate them about the fact that people in the Muslim world happen to be Muslim, and they will elect, parties that identify as Muslim, and that by its, at its face value, should not make determinations from the U.S. foreign policy. On the second point, which is my last point, is that we have to send a clear message to our foes and allies around the world that we are going to actually, for real, center human rights in our foreign policy. Whether it was Israel committing human rights violations or whether it was Cuba, that we are going to criticize them. Whether it was a Tunisian president that we support or a Haitian president who we oppose, whatever. Regardless of our political analysis, that we are going to have a principled stance to support democratic procedures. We have not seen this from the U.S. government yet. We have not seen it from the Biden administration, but we will continue to call on them to do the right thing.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate your time. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll get some progress on this point in the coming days, inshallah. Let us know if there's anything you want to we can do to help you and support you, to amplify your calls and your demands. We're here to help, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you all for watching. We appreciate it. A lot going on in the world. May keep your eyes open. Keep track of this. It impacts all of us. It matters to all of us, especially our ummah. May Allah grant relief to the people of Tunisia and all around the world, all mankind, guidance and relief and protection from injustice. With that, we thank you all so much for joining. Inshallah, we'll see you on Thursday at 3 p.m. for the next episode of CAIR on Air. If you have any topics you want us to address, email us at info@cair.com to let us know so we can consider that. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.